Welcome to The Intentional Investor with Matt Zeigler, where he and his guests explore the intersection of investing and life, portfolio, and purpose. Nothing in this podcast is investment advice. Nothing in this podcast is advising you to buy or sell any security or to do anything with your money. Seriously, you should only act on investment advice from someone you know and who knows your unique situation. We are not that person. Matt Zeigler is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments, and the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments or of Second Foundation Partners. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of Sunpoint Investments.
You're watching The Intentional Investor here on the Epsilon Theory YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matt Zeigler, and I am joined today by, let's just say, his ready, aim, fire is shoot, move, communicate. His eat, pray, love is eat, sleep, PT. His quantitative values are qualitatively momentous. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not Beta Bob the Builder. He's not Gamma, the general contractor grandma. He's not even Fast Epsilon Eddie, the quickest ETF exchanger in the land. No, my guest today, the Alpha Architect himself, Wes Gray. Welcome to the show.
That was quite the introduction, Matt. Matt, honored to be here.
I'm available to be your hype man. You let me know the time and the place, and I'm going to show up.
I'm in, man. You're hired. But I always tell people, I just want to be rich, not famous. So I don't need a hype man.
I'll carry the bags of money for you.
Okay, great.
In silence.
Okay,
In
I
silence.
like that. That's doable.
I got to ask this question first before we get into the depths of this, because I feel like the voice, the accent, I've described you for far too long to people. I've said this lovingly, of course. I've said Wes is kind of like, you can read him. You could read the books. I got all the books back there on the shelf. But it's to hear him talk is the basically quant investing's favorite Ninja Turtle. Like California is in your youth. Like, where did you grow up? Where's this voice come from?
Yeah, it's a hodgepodge. I moved a lot as a kid. I think it's like 20 times or something crazy, but predominantly Colorado, California, and then I also have a lot of family in like Oklahoma, Texas. You know, so there's a lot of influence there too. So I kind of got a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of things. And we used to go to Mexico all the time. My uncle who passed, I got a bunch of cousins and an aunt lived down in Mexico. We used to go there every year to go fishing and hanging out. So, you know, as a kid, we used to hang around, try to speak Spanish and do that as well. So
do you speak any other, do you speak multiple languages?
I live in Puerto Rico, and so I say I'm a functional Spanish speaker. And back in the service, I was a functional Iraqi Arabic speaker, but I am not smart enough to say I'm fluent in like 20 languages. That'd be nice, but it doesn't work out. I'm functional. I can talk like a 2-year-old and get anything done in Spanish, but you're not going to want to do a grammar test on me because I'll probably get an F, but people understand what I'm trying to say and I understand what they're saying. So it's all good.
That's the most important part. If somebody understands what you're trying to tell them. So
Exactly.
take me back in time. I want to start here with you because I'm long fascinated by this part. You're in Chicago. You're, I believe, 2 years deep in the PhD program, and you decide you're going to take 4 years off, not to go surfing, not to go do something else, but your Chicago PhD program. What do you decide to take 4 years off? And then I have a follow-up question about this.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, like I grew up on a ranch and we were always broke. And my lifelong goal was just stop being broke and get rich. And so that's why I kind of stumbled into this whole finance thing. I was like, that seems a lot better than bucking hay all day. And then I went down that path. You know, I was like a Wharton undergrad, you know, all the hoity-toity finance stuff there. And then I got into this PhD program at University of Chicago, which is like the Mecca. And it was pretty clear to me that, okay, I'm solving this rich thing. I'm not going to be broke anymore. But then, you know, at the time, you know, I was an athlete in college. I was an athlete as a kid. I, you know, grew up on a cattle ranch in the mountains. I don't know. I just was always attracted to like the spirit of the service and like the adventure of it all and just kind of like doing your time. Yeah, it sounds cliche, but I just like America. I like the Constitution. I like freedom. I like what we're all about. And because, if no one's putting the shovel in the ground, the stuff goes away. And I was like, well, I'm 24, I'm in great shape and I can go keep getting rich down the road, but I can only join the service one time. And I got to do this now or never. So, and it was just, it's one of those things where, is this the best time? Of course not. You don't want to leave halfway through your PhD program, but it was the only, I just had to do it. Otherwise it was never going to happen. So it really wasn't much more sexier than that. I just did it.
Who can never, and I know you're a family oriented person. There's no way this decision happens in a vacuum either. So I'm curious because there's the literal like parents question, hey, mom and dad, I want to go do this thing. But then I'm sure like you got to go to thesis advisors. There's the administrative clearance, significant others. Like who did you have to ask before?
So basically I lied to my parents and just said, hey, I'm going to join the Marines and be a finance officer, which isn't even a job. Cause obviously if your mom hears you're going to the Marines, she's going to be like, that ain't happening. So, so I had to tell a white lie because parents, it's just why get them, too worked up for no reason. It just doesn't make any sense. Right. And so got to the family thing. My brothers were cool, they're like, whatever, that sounds great. Like I should probably do that too. So no issues there. At the family level, obviously my mom was not happy at all, but is what it is. And then my longtime girlfriend, now my wife for almost 20 years now, she was like, I think you're crazy, but I support the decision. This is when she was like my girlfriend. So obviously it was clearly this was going to be my wife, but she's like, I support you. I was like, oh, wow, this lady's supporting, a knucklehead who thought she was getting a finance PhD, now get a Marine. That's probably a keeper. So that worked out. And then I had to go through the formal process where at the program at the time, legally, you only got like a 1-year hiatus, sabbatical, whatever they call it.
At
right?
Chicago. That was like the Chicago school
yes.
rule. Okay.
Yeah, that's the rule. That was the policy. And so I had to go to the PhD director. And just by luck, she happened to be, her husband was a Navy chief. And so her husband had been in the service for like over 20 years. And so she was very amiable to what I was trying to achieve. She's like, you know what? I think this is a great thing and I'm going to support it, but you're going to have to get all your advisors to sign off. And at the time I had like the most gold-plated advisor setup ever. I had Eugene Fama, I had Richard Thaler, and then Andrea Frazzini, right? He went off to be Richard famous. All three. They were all my
I don't think I knew about Frazzini too. That's amazing.
Yeah. So he, and this was way back in the day. This was 2002, 2003. So, Fama was obviously really famous, clearly, even back then. But like Thaler was kind of like a weirdo behavioral guy, wasn't that famous. Frazzini was just like a new startup professor, whatever, not that famous. I just, by dumb luck, these guys became like Nobel Prize winners. But anyways, at the time, I just had to go ask them and get them to sign off. And, I don't think he had any comments. He's like, all good, man. Do what you got to do. Thaler basically thought I was crazy and says, you're going to do what? And so we had a little bit of conversation there. He didn't really understand any of it.
Set up for a life of policy advising, clearly.
Yeah, exactly. And then Fama was just like, he was kind of like, that's awesome, man. Like, it's kind of weird, but I support it. It's that was relatively straightforward. But and then once I had all the paperwork in place, then there's a whole process of you got to go to, I don't even remember, I think whatever, the officer candidate selection thing. And then they just, there's a whole process and pipeline of getting into the Marine Corps officer ranks and then getting into their systems. And that's just what I did. So, yeah.
I want to go back. So I'm going back in time, skipping around on the timeline here a little bit too. The whole stop being broke, get rich thing.
Yeah.
I mean, working on farms and living in places like that, there's nothing more that'll make you go, well, I know this sucks, so something else must be better. But when do you start realizing there's this like markets are a thing? How do you even become aware this is a
Yeah.
thing?
So again, a lot of things are just good luck and timing. So when I used to live, it was called Adamsburg Ranch. I don't know what it's called now. I think the Coors family bought it. But my dad was a ranch manager. He was basically like in charge of running the thing, right? And so we used to live in a ranch hut there, and we didn't have any money. And I used to go work with the Mexican dudes all day, hating my life. And I was like literally like 5 or 6 when I started, which now my kids like. I'm like, I used to, when I was your guys' age, like, I feel like the old guy now. Like, I used to go snow for 10 miles to get to school. And I was like, but I actually like did that. Like, my kids are weak, but I was like literally that kid that had to do that. And then one of the things though, is when you live on a ranch, we used to do this thing called 4-H. It's like where you raise animals and sell them at the fair or whatever. Right. And so we do everything, and I ended up raising a steer called Big Red. And whatever, got lucky. I think I got like 3rd place in that deal. And I got like crazy amount of money. I don't know what it was, like $4 or $5 a pound. And, usually like live cattle prices are like 50 cents. So I ended up with basically after costs and everything, like 2 or 3 grand, which is a crazy amount of money, back in early 80s. And my dad is like, you got more money than I do. And he's like, I don't know.
How old are you?
That was probably 10 or 11, something like that.
Okay.
I think maybe I was 9. I don't remember exact age, but I was like a young kid, like, wasn't a teenager yet for sure. And then, my dad basically, because I asked him, I was like, hey, what should I do? And then what I did is at the time, this is actually even more crazy. I invested in Janus funds. I don't know if you know what
The
Janus
concentrated fund? One of
yeah,
those?
the Janus 20 fund. It's like
the Janus, that's the one.
now it's
Why did I
infamous.
know that's the one that
Yeah, because that's what they sold that to everyone on the planet Earth, including my dad through like his brokers.
It's okay.
But then
you got an A share? You did the
I don't
right
even
thing?
remember. I probably got screwed. But at the time, it was just what my dad
was the
did.
thing.
So he did that. But then I asked him, I was like, hey, what should I do? And he told me, he's like, hey, talk to Grandma Jenny, who my grandmother, she'd done real estate or whatever, lived in California. And then my grandmother was a massive Warren Buffett fan. And so she sent me like, Intelligent Investor, Buffettology, and a few other like Warren Buffett type books. And she's like, hey, if you want to learn about investing, and you don't want to hire Janus, you should read about this guy. And again, just because, I used to like Nintendo like everyone else too, but I was like, hey, I should do this because this is kind of cool. You have money and it can make more money. I should probably learn about that. So I just got kind of tied in to like the whole Warren Buffett, Ben Graham thing, like old school value investing at a young age. And it just resonated with me. Like, hey, buy cheap stuff and, do things that are hard, be disciplined, be sensible. It just seemed like my lifestyle or culture. And so that's kind of where I started, where the journey started right there.
Do you feel like the farm, the 4-H, the other stuff, did that help make Buffett make more sense to you, that experience? Was there a through line?
I think there was, because like he has his kids in ag, like they're from Nebraska. Like it's just the culture of like ranching and farming of like, just kind of by nature, conservative, reasonable. Like it's not like a showy, like, I don't know. It's just the culture of value investing, especially like the style and like the culture of Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, all those folks. It seems like it seems very similar to the culture of ranching and farming. Whereas like maybe another analogy might be like ARK investing, Kathy Wood is like the culture of Palo Alto or something, right? There's just different vibes. I can't really explain this, but it just, ranching culture and that world is very in tune with like what Warren Buffett is all about beyond investing, I feel like. And so it just seemed like a natural fit for me in particular.
So then how do you get from, let's just be clear, award-winning 4-H camper, Wes Gray, who then has his Ben Graham book tied to his hip, and like, how does that turn into, like, are you good in high school? How do you get to college?
So basically what happened is I got so obsessed with investing, right? Especially right when I hit the ground running at college, I would literally go to the stacks and go to the investment section and just read every book. like I was very like Warren Buffett centric or anything related to that.
What
Like
what years is this though? Like what's on the library shelf at your
okay, so this
college?
is perfect timing because
Yeah.
this is 98.
Okay.
Right,
So we're like,
right at the top of the internet bubble. But luckily, I was not in tune with that whole thing. I was all about value just because that's what I got introduced to, which obviously, as we all know after the fact, was serendipitous because a few years later,
yeah,
I
few
thought
years and you're a genius.
I'm a
Yeah.
genius. Exactly.
Right. You're gonna be a
So,
trillionaire.
yeah.
No
So
more
I was,
bucket hay for you, my friend.
exactly. I was so lucky because I never really got caught up in like the NASDAQ 100, triple Q, like kind of the deja vu of what's going on right now, just because the timing wasn't off. And I started
Right.
with Buffett and that's just what I was doing. So I kept doing that. And then so I did my own personal money. I tried to start an investment club like as a freshman, the whole 9 yards. And
I bet you were
I just,
popular with that.
yeah, all 5 of us in the club. But I was obsessed, man. I just loved it. And I don't know, I just was really into it. And then, over time, I actually, fortunately or unfortunately, I kind of transitioned to actually liking the intellectual aspect of finance, right? And because once you get past this like fundamental stock picking, value investing, I took an investment course there at Penn. Like now it's all the quant stuff. Like I'm like, oh my God, like this world is levels upon levels deep. I mean, you could go levels upon levels just in value investing, but there's like 50 investing games and they all have max depth. And so I just kind of found it fascinating, not just for getting rich purposes, but just as an intellectual thing to think about all the time.
Like books, like what was the thing that, is it just the simplicity of like later stage, like Buffett and Graham, like just do the, price to book is like a good rule of thumb. Like what makes you start thinking that way?
Yeah. What I was really into was like arbitrage trades, like special situations. So
Okay.
I did like old school, like cigar butts. I did like closed in fund arbitrage where back in the old days, they would do these self tenders and they had like
Mhm.
odd lot restrictions to like 100. So I would go open like 50 accounts in street name at Ameritrade or Daytech, whatever the hell it was called. And I would just buy 99 in all of them because I'd get 25% guaranteed. And
Yeah.
because they're all in street name, they would treat them as all like sub 100. So
Right.
I just like the game of like these little like mini
Hustles.
arbitrages, hustles, and it's just fun and whatever. So I was really into that stuff. I like cigar butts too. Like, wow, I can buy this company for literally 50 cents on the dollar. And it was always like penny stocks that you could put like $2,000 in or something like that. But so, it wasn't like a real game, but it was fun for me because I didn't have a lot of money. So yeah, I was into the game of it, like the arbitrage. And back then, I don't know if you remember, but like, we didn't have great tech. So everything was on like Yahoo Finance and
Right.
like Raging Bull message boards. And I actually created like real genuine friendships in the special situation space. It was like, Twitter, but before Twitter was around, I create like real relationships, like guys I still even know to this day. And I'd go
From the
meet them at
message
their
boards.
house. Yeah. From like Yahoo message boards where we're
Well,
talking about like arbitrage and liquidation stubs for like some penny stock. It's crazy. Um, so
that's wild. I'm picturing like you and wasn't Michael Burry active on those? Like thinking like the
yeah,
weight
oh
of
yeah. And my cross
the
sections
first
of
Greenbat
friends.
book and everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. This was before that, but a lot of those guys, like
Well, right.
I have friends that were like multi-hundred millionaires, like 7-year-olds that were just bored. I had buddies in like Beverly Hills, like the cross section of who was hanging out on Yahoo message boards talking about special situation like arbitrage opportunities. You name it, it was all across the board, man. Which was also fun because it was this very eccentric group that would traffic in something like that. And that might be the case today. I'm just not involved in that game anymore, but I'm sure it's way more sophisticated networking and, message boards or social networks where you can still talk shop on, crazy, weird arbitrage opportunities.
Does anything scratch that, like that? There's a weird communal itch, like that level of curiosity at the community level. Does anything scratch that itch for you today? Is there any?
Yes, for sure. So I used to love it because it was like the game. It's like your sports team, like your buddies, you're
Yeah.
like crossing
Yeah.
notes, and it's like very, very communal because if it's just you And I'm not, no one else in college wants to talk about this stuff because they're all talking about girls or, sports or whatever. So you always find your community, but, luckily, I've had the privilege now, been doing this for like 15 years, like your team eventually is your community. So like all my teammates, all my colleagues, everyone I work with, like everyone we met out in the world, like we created the community. So I don't have a craving for it because we have it. It's there every day. And even just within our own business, there's always someone to talk to, shoot ideas around. It's not in the context of, weird penny stock special situations, which would also be fun.
That's good.
Yeah,
Also
yeah.
would be fun.
If I
We're glad you
retired
progressed.
and I was bored, I'd probably go do that because I'm a degenerate. By nature, but it's just, that's not obviously like an appropriate thing for me to do now. And it's a waste of my time, but I do enjoy that game because it's a fun thing to do. But, now I got to, do ETF infrastructure and, quote unquote, more serious things, which are also interesting and fun, but it's not as exciting as, penny stock trading for sure. I'll be honest.
On the Yahoo Finance message boards.
On the Yahoo yes, exactly. Yeah, where you never know what you're going to get. But
all right,
that was fun.
The longest round trip way to go back to, you tell your girlfriend, no wife. You tell mom and dad and siblings. You tell the thesis advisors, which still, just clarify this point. So literally Frazzini, Thaler, and Fama are like, they're overseeing your, like they're going to oversee your dissertation, like the whole nine?
What they were is so how the program works is there's a 2-year curriculum paper requirement. Okay. And the theory is that curriculum paper then evolves into your dissertation. So what happened, these guys, Fama was on my final dissertation advisory committee. They were on my curriculum committee, which technically if I had stayed there, they probably would have been on my dissertation committee. But remember, I left for 4 years, came back. Now Thaler's got a, Nobel Prize,
a book deal and a Nobel.
Yeah, he's not
Frazzini's hanging out with Asmus or whatever he was doing.
Frazzini's got his Lamborghini at AQR. Thaler's like way too famous to talk to me. And then
Fama's still grinding. He's still doing the thing.
Yeah. Exactly. He's still grinding. He's in the game. And he's just, that's his jam. Right. So he's always going to be the rock. But the other guys were also awesome. I don't mean to disparage him whatsoever.
No.
It's just after 4 or 5 years, things change.
Life changes.
Yeah, and when I came back, they're like, who the hell is this guy? Because I changed a lot, right? Like being 4 years in the service, you're a different person going in versus coming out. And then life changes at the university. We had a new school. Like we used to be in the old school GSB buildings. And when I got back, they had the Booth School. So they had a $300-400 million institution. I was like, wow, this is a little different than when I was in the program. Like we actually get computers now, where they used to stuff me and like all the other PhDs in like this little cubicle in the attic. And they said, you guys scurry off and, go program. When I came back, there's obviously way more resources available, which was awesome.
Wild. I feel like there's actually a thing, it might've been in Thaler's book about when that happens and basically the game theory of how the different professors of which tenure, like how they got their offices. I was like,
oh yeah, I'm sure there was a lot
this is a cool markets experiment. How do offices get built out for these guys?
Yeah, I could see that.
So while you're away, how long do you do active duty? How long are you actually like physically in Iraq and doing that stuff?
So here's the timeline. I went to the PhD program 2002, left 2004, beginning of summer, and then was in the training pipeline. And then I was basically in the service from 2004 and I got out like early 2008. So technically it was just shy of 4 years. Like, well, I don't even remember, 3 years and 9 months or whatever, right? Because I'd added up leave and all this other stuff. But just call it 4 years for easy math. So I was gone. So in the program 2002, 2004, left the program 2004, 2008, and then obviously ended up coming back 2008, 2010 to finish. But then the pipeline in the Marines, like I was what they call a ground intelligence officer. It's like 0203. It's basically a fancy way of saying like an infantry monkey with a map. Because essentially it's the longest training pipeline. It's like a 1.5 year pipeline where you go to this thing called OCS. That's like, they just haze you to make sure you can even do this. Then what the Marine Corps does is they send you to a 6-month training school called the basic school. And that's just baseline officer training to just give you like basic rifleman infantry competency. And then you go off to your MOS schools. And then, so for us, I went right to infantry officer school. Because for 0203s, you basically got to do the full quals for like infantry officer. And I don't even remember, that's probably like 3 or 4 months of just getting beat down all day. Then after that, then we have to go do all the intel stuff. So I did basic intel course, ground intel course, the sniper platoon commander course. I don't even remember all the stupid courses we took. But, the main point is our pipeline in particular, I was in for 4 years. 1.5 years of it was just training. Right. And then right when I got out of all the training pipeline, they sent me to Okinawa, and I was there for probably, I don't even know, 2 or 3 weeks. And then I immediately got sent to the Philippines. I don't even remember, a couple months or something. I don't remember. And then right when I got back, my boss is like, "Hey, you're going to Iraq." I'm like, "Okay, great." Actually, the funny story on that, it was even worse than that. My boss didn't tell me this. I came back and I got an email. They said, "Hey, why aren't you in Hawaii?" And I'm like, "Who the hell's this guy?" And I went to go talk to my boss. They're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, you're on like a MIT team, like an Iraqi training team. And you're supposed to be in Hawaii, but you're in the Philippines. So I didn't tell you yet." I was like, "Okay." And, you just do what you're told. And so like, right when I got home, they're like, "Hey, you have like 24 hours to get on a plane and have all your stuff ready to go to Hawaii to do like a workup to go to Iraq." And so then I went to Hawaii. We did this like big, you do all this like training stuff, went to 29 Palms, whatever. Then I went to Iraq, and that was, I don't know, 7, 8 months, probably all in total. And then I came back to Okinawa, and then I got out like 6 to 8 months later. So like it was just, I was technically stationed in Okinawa, but I was probably in Okinawa for like a year. Maybe if I was lucky. When I was in, is when they had all the things going on. So it was just like, it was insane. It was like the quickest 4 years ever. But like, huge op tempo, just traveling, going to places all the time. So
this is like a super intense crucible, and now like a super intense physical crucible, the travel schedule. That's a lot. Like this is, this obviously, I would think it doesn't connect this to like PhD prep to Marine prep. I feel like it's just stimulating on a whole other way. Like, do you thrive in that type of that situation?
Yes. So I used to be crazy. And I don't know if you know who David Goggins is, but he talks about this concept of callousing the mind, and you can train toughness. And I really believe that, because now I'm not tough anymore. Right. But like when I first entered the PhD program, I used to be a D1 athlete back in the day. So I was pretty disciplined just by nature.
What was your sport?
I was a track guy. I was a pole vaulter in college.
Okay. That makes sense. You getting it's a form of leverage, I think, right?
Yeah. I used to fly around there and try to jump over things. But so I'd always kind of been inherently like more disciplined than average Joe, just because being an athlete, you kind of have to be. And then you get into the PhD program, but your discipline shifts from like physical discipline to mental discipline, because you just, the game there is like academics and mental training, which is great. But the Marines obviously is like a whole nother degree, and there's a lot more on the line, because you're basically in charge of other people's kids and you're getting shot at. So like the stakes, it's you can't get any higher. So this is like the real game. That's the most competitive game, is how I thought about it, because I just treat it like a sport. And I was like, all right, well, this is a game where you could die. So like, I've got to be insanely disciplined and just basically crazy. Because the only way I'm going to win this game is I just got to out-train, outwork whatever the competition is going to be. So I did that. And I just, like I said, I callous my mind, and because you have to. But callousing your mind is mentally taxing, and it sucks to be disciplined all the time, every single waking moment. However, it has like a legacy. Just like if you were like a distance runner, if you run 10 miles a day for 10 years and you just stop doing it, it's not like you're going to lose your air. You're still going to have it, right? So right when I got out of the Marines, like weirdly, even though I didn't remember how to do finance anymore, I was actually very well positioned to do well and do it efficiently because I was just so disciplined. And I had this legacy of Marine Corps discipline about me. So I was able to facilitate that, even though my brain was obviously mush with respect to like quant stuff and finance things. But then also because I wasn't, being crazy anymore, I slowly like adapted to being a civilian again. And now I'm just, I still probably more disciplined than most people now, but like I'm definitely more civilian, yeah, military these days. So that's kind of how it happened. Like it was definitely Marine Corps helped me succeed in the PhD program after the fact, but not in a way that you would think. It wasn't about like the brain power. Obviously, I probably lost brain power, but the focus was. I was very good at focusing at the time.
Is there I'm not overstating this or not trying to like emphasize this too much, but it's kind of that link between the physical fitness and the mental fitness to take care of yourself. I know I was kind of like joking about it at the beginning, but saying like, you got to take care of yourself. You got to eat well, you got to sleep well, you got to get your PT.
100%. That is our motto. Like, because if you don't, and there's a lot of research on this now, right? Like in old days, people didn't think like this, but in the end, like you're an organic, but you're a machine that's organic. And how do you think the brain works? Well, you got to have better air, better blood, good, got to manage cortisol, like all of these things to make you very good at being smart and thinking clearly. It starts with baseline. Are you sleeping well? Are you got good nutrition? And are you taking care of your physical health? And some people can obviously not do that and still succeed in like mental avenues. But I think everybody can optimize that and maximize what, you're kind of born with some level of horsepower, I imagine. I'm not a scientist, but I assume that's probably true. But if you want to maximize that horsepower that you got, you got to take care of the engine and the body. And that's just like the fundamentals. You got to be you got to be physically fit. You got to make sure you sleep, got to make sure you get good nutrition. And that's going to set you up to probably maximize your mental capacity and effort. So I think that everything is intertwined. Like, and I feel like it's very important. If people want to be successful, they just need to focus on the fundamentals of taking care of themselves. Otherwise you can't take care of anyone else.
When you get back from the service and you're back in Chicago and the much fancier Booth School that you return to and get cracking on this dissertation, what's the final dissertation topic and what's going on in your mind and your life at that point?
Yeah. So like obviously my mission shifted from Marines to like, how do I graduate from this damn place?
That's a big change.
Yes, it was.
And you're not rich yet.
No, I'm not rich, but now I'm like, now I got to go get rich. Let's go figure this out. Now I got to solve the original problem I had. Cause obviously you're not getting rich in the Marines. I'd done all right with some investments cause just by dumb luck, cause we had a lot of beta there, for 08. Cause remember, this is before 08 happened. That, a lot of stories after that. Yeah. But at the time I was feeling pretty rich for whatever, a 27, 28-year-old that I've never had a real job before. But so first stage one was just, I went crazy on fundamentals, right? I need to relearn everything I had known before. And it is kind of like training wheels. Like it took me about 6 months, but I was able to kind of take 2 years and jam that into 6 months and get back to 11. I just powered that out. I was like, I need to remember how to do calculus because I forgot. Like it was literally that bad. Just because you need fundamental tools to know what the hell is going on. And I also relearned programming and all that kind of stuff. And then immediately I was like, all right, it's pretty clear to me that if you're going to have a dissertation and you want to do an empirical dissertation, you got to find your own personal data set because every single PhD has been spinning the CRISP tapes and CompuStat tapes for the last 50 years. I'm probably not as smart as them. So why am I going to try to just, data mine for the next best thing? It's just impossible. And as you probably know this, like, I had always been a stock picker. And I'd always been part of Value Investors Club and the whole Joel Greenblatt thing. And I thought that was awesome. And as I already told you, my whole life was about message boards, sharing ideas. Like I just grew up like, right. But the problem is the economic theory and ideas at that time, it was like still kind of very like Milton Friedman in a sense that like, well, okay, if I'm a hedge fund, why would I ever share my good idea with anybody? Like the economic theory at the time, which is still kind of the case, is like, well, I would go borrow as much money as humanly possible, lever my face off, and go take advantage of this arbitrage opportunity for myself. Why would I ever share this with anybody? But like, obviously, intuitively, I had done that my whole life. And I just intuitively know, like, well, why do I do that? Well, because I might get other ideas, like quid pro quos, like other people share their ideas to me. You want to be in the flow. You can fact check your idea to make sure you're not missing something. Like, I just thought naturally, like, even if you have really good ideas, if you have a good syndicate of other people you kind of like and trust, if there is a win-win to collaborate, right? So, and then obviously it just so happened that that's exactly what Value Investors Club was doing. It was facilitating this idea that, hey, in the real world, really smart people, yeah, they're going to share their ideas and share their alpha, but like the quid pro quo is, there's a benefit to them. And so my dissertation was, the first part was a theory paper, which is just all the math explaining like what's the rationality of why, Milton Friedman was not right. And like, what are the benefits and cost analysis that would make you want to collaborate with good ideas? And it basically boils down to like collaboration, diversification opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then of course, through that theory, you then create hypotheses like, well, I think this will happen, that'll happen. And then of course, Value Investors Club is the empirical playground where we can go test these theories. Right. So, that's kind of like how, science is supposed to go. Like you have your theory, you got all your different hypotheses. Now you got to go find some data. And obviously the data is never going to fit perfectly exactly to your theory because we can't run controlled experiments in economics, but it was pretty damn close. Right.
So back this up for a second though, because you found a different class of Yahoo message board in the Value Investors Club. So for people who weren't around in that era, explain what this special cohort was.
Yeah. So in the way old days, the only place you could share ideas is on Yahoo Finance, which let's say there's some quality control issues on there, right?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
No, you're saying exactly. It's like being on Reddit equivalent to these days. Like some of it's good, 99% of it's really bad. And so Joe Greenblatt and his friends, they said, hey, let's create like a high quality Yahoo Finance message board, because clearly there's benefits to sharing. And so they created an organization where essentially you had to qualify through actual earned merits on submitting a live idea in great detail. And then because they've been doing this forever, they could kind of assess like who's a real value investor versus a faker. And then they created this organization where it was like all these like super qualified, super in the weed value geeks that would then share their ideas. And then, then other people could get delayed access or whatever. And then you could rate the ideas. It's basically like Yahoo Finance on steroids, but there was, a gatekeeper element. And of course, that gatekeeper element basically meant that indirectly, you basically had a bunch of small hedge fund manager types and like individuals that are really good on this club for all intents and purposes, right? It was like a professional version of Yahoo Finance. So that's essentially what Value Investors Club did. I don't know what it is today. I assume it's probably a similar
It's probably
idea.
something similar. But how many, and what was it like? Was it like a couple hundred people at the time-ish?
It was probably something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And they had, I can't remember. I think it was started in 2000. So I had about like, all I remember is, so the problem was, so my idea was like, all right, great. This is unstructured data. And again, this was before we had all these fancy tools and everything. I used to use like Perl for like scraping. I'm sure now you could do it with a button click or whatever, but I had to make all this unstructured data where it was like 4,000 individual stock pitches, right? And I got to figure out, okay, create a database structure, create a classification structure, and now and I literally am going to have to go hand jam. And I literally read every single pitch that's ever been submitted on that damn website. And I just painstakingly, it took me like a year, like put this into a database that then I could do studies and experiments and what have you, right? And
And
again,
this is the idea for like the dissertation. Like you want to take this
yes,
to school. You're like,
what
I've
yes,
got all these geniuses.
exactly. I have the theories that suggest that smart people will share good ideas with each other, and there's all these different like nuanced hypotheses. And
Mhm.
it just so happens that now I have an empirical playground where these guys have kind of done that. They've collected a bunch of really smart people that are all sharing ideas, and now we can go assess. Like, and the first and most important part is, are these ideas any good? And luckily, empirically, that's just factually true. The ideas, especially if you segment it and everything, like on Value Investors Club, at least until that point, were actually alpha generating. Like
Wow.
they were delivering, and which all of a sudden made, which was great, because now it really got interesting, because like, wait, we've actually identified empirically a group of people that are actually sharing really good ideas, especially in small caps.
Hmm.
Like they add real alpha, like however you want to define what alpha is, and so that was good. And then okay, now we can get more nuance, because now we've established the fact that these are just like, these are real people. It isn't the Yahoo Finance board anymore. Like, some ideas obviously suck, but on average, they're real operators. And now we could go test other things. Like, hey, if they're higher rated, if there's more collaboration, does that add value? There's all these like stupid theories, because it's, dissertations, you got to geek out and talk about things that maybe two people in the world will actually read. And I did a lot of that stuff just to flesh it out. And then, and then you got to go present it, defend it, convince these smart people that it's unique, different, adds value to the world. And then you graduate. So that's basically what I did.
What did Fama think of this idea? Did he look at this thing and go, Wes, you genius, you, I love this?
No. And funny, I've read Cliff Asmus's story when he proposed, like, I'm going to do a dissertation on momentum.
Yeah.
And he literally said the same, like, Fama said basically the same thing to me. His philosophy, and I really believe this about the guy, at least in like a private domain. Hey, do the analysis and the data speak for themselves. I'm not going to have any bias. Like, just like Cliff said, hey, I'm going to do his dissertation on momentum. Like, he's not going to say like, you're an idiot. Like, what are you thinking? I'll never approve that. He says, well, great. Show me, do the analysis, do the data, and present it to me. And then I'll do my assessment after that, that's the only fair way to go about it. Same thing like my thing, right? Like, hey, I think I found a bunch of stock pickers, i.e. people that are anti-DFA and everything you sell. But, I'm convinced, and I think there's true economic reasons why they're sharing these good ideas and why they're good ideas. And he's like, great, do the research, write it up, and present it. And, so I feel like he's a very fair person in that respect, especially from like a research. Obviously, like in a public domain, because you can't have nuanced argument or have any conversation. If you ask him, hey, what do you think about momentum? He'll probably say momentum's stupid. But like obviously in reality, he's not dumb. He has nuanced arguments and nuanced understanding of everything. It's just, sometimes your public, presentation of something, it might be very different than if we were talking on like a one-on-one basis and had an opportunity to actually have a discussion.
So you write the paper.
Yeah.
He eventually says, you're still not an idiot. You get the passing grade on the paper. And then certainly by then you just take the paper, you go out in the real world. Now you're rich, right?
No, unfortunately, I'm still not rich yet. I'm trying.
Okay.
But
Okay.
what happens is, so you do the whole, I don't remember what the terms are for, but basically it's like a year-long process to like propose and then defend. And it's, as you can imagine, it's a total nightmare, super stressful. And like one of the best days of my life, besides having my kids, was when after you defend and like, cause then they'll sit there and they'll tell you like, up or out. And you're like, you did it. Like, they can't take the PhD from me. I finally did this at this point, right? Like maybe it all goes downhill from now and I get ran over, but at least I did this. Like,
this thing.
I got this stupid thing, right? So then I immediately, okay, now I got to transition, because I'm married. I got a kid, like I got real responsibilities in the world. And so immediately I go on the professor market, right? So the academic market, it's a centralized market. Obviously it's really efficient because a bunch of economists run it, but it's like a centrally cleared market at the beginning of January. Where you go there, you do 1 million interviews and then you do your flyouts. And it's like a big match.com for like PhDs and academic institutions, right? So
Romantic.
I went that route. And obviously, back in the day, I used to write a blog too, because I just was always into like talking about this stuff. So this was like 2000, whatever, 10. So what happened is I went on the academic job market and had like, I don't even remember, tons of flyouts, all this stuff. But then Drexel hit me up and they gave me an exploding offer. And because my wife is also a PhD, but in history, which is a lot harder to get a job. And they basically gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. My wife's from Philly, and I was off the academic market within like a week. Like I started it and I was done. And I was just like, you know what? Whatever. I know Philly. I don't like it personally. My wife loves it. She wants to go back home. Fine. Good. And then weirdly, while this was happening, I'm also having conversations with rich people who read my blog. Right. And so the professor was like the bird in the hand because, I'm going to go, those jobs at the time, they're paying like 250K and you work like 10 weeks a year. So it's not exactly like a rough life. And at, 250K at the time, that was like more money than God has. I was like, holy cow, this is the greatest thing ever. In the Marines, you make like 40K.
Right.
So I was rich for all intents and purposes. And then, so I go through that pipeline but then I started having conversations with actual rich people and this was simultaneous to basically like all this was happening while I was being an academic and then also getting courted and starting to try to work on the business, like the beginnings of what is now, our current business. But yeah, and then, then a lot of things happen from then and now, but that's essentially where the get rich phase started. Took a while, but yeah, the beginnings of it.
What's the first pulling you out of academic? Like, what's the first cold email, blog reply, whatever else that's real? That's like, holy crap, it's a job.
Yeah. So even stepping further back than this, I actually started a hedge fund immediately when I got out of the service. And that's just because I was doing some blogging stuff, but even more ghetto than like my eventually ghetto blog spot thing. And I met this guy who's like a huge Warren Buffett fan. And so we ended up launching a hedge fund in September 2008. Okay. Like the worst time you could ever do it. We raised like $3 million. Long story short, that was my first attempt. That obviously didn't work out too well. And then my second attempt is a family out of Cleveland. Long story short, that kind of worked out, but not well. And then my third attempt was literally a billionaire called me. And this is the actual story. Like you can't even make it up, but I'm literally at my grandmother's house in New Mexico and I get a call from this dude.
Is it Grandma Ginny?
No, this is Grandma Glenda.
Okay.
Grandma Ginny,
I had to check.
Yeah, no, it's different grandmother. This is my
Glenda,
Oklahoma,
the good grandmother.
Yeah, the good Glenda, the good witch. So they live in a little small town in New Mexico, and they have a bunch of horses, live on like a little mini farm type thing. So I'm sitting there, I was probably doing some work or whatever, and I got this cell phone call, 212 number, New York. I'm like, I'll probably grab it. And I talked to this guy. And he's like, yeah, I've been reading your blog, I'm a multi-billionaire and, I've been referenced. Actually, Meb Faber gave me a good record because I know Meb forever.
Yeah.
And I talked to Meb. He says, you're like the man when it comes to research and all this stuff. And I'm like, is this like really like a billionaire calling me? And then of course, right as he's calling me, my grandmother starts screaming at me because the horses were out. And so literally I tell this guy, I'm like, Eddie, I was like, man, I swear to God, can I call you back? Like, cause I got to go help my grandmother here put these horses in. And he's like, what? And I was just like, I'll call you back. And then like I hung up, got the horses and I called him back up. And then I explained, I was like, sorry, man, and now I started doing my own vetting because, I thought it was like some sort of scam. And he's like, no, Google me here. Here's our website. I was like, oh my God, this is like an actual billionaire. Like I never met one before, let alone talked to one. Anyways, one thing led to the other, like met him up in New York. And then, basically started off like as a consultant. I like my idea was like, hey, seed me. And this was when I was working on that quantitative value book. I was like, hey, I'm going to write this book. Like this is a strategy I've been working on for years or whatever behind the scenes. Can we get this funded? But unfortunately he's like, nah, we just got out of the seeding business. Been doing that our whole lives. I want your quant like brain to help us get things squared away. Right. I was like, okay, fine. And then, so we did that for a couple of years. And then 2012, while I was being a professor and kind of moonlight consulting, that's when we got our 50 mil seed in like, what at that time was SMA version of quantitative value and then international quantitative value. And then I got Jack involved, who was my PhD research assistant at the time. And then we had a few students, some of my best students in Drexel, because I used to run the MS finance program there. I just, we had like a gang of us. And then that was kind of like the start of what became, Alpha Architect and everything.
So like and I remember reading, I think this is part of it. Like this is when you're writing like the blog back in that era is you're doing the academic paper summaries. You're doing the other stuff. I remember like every day at noon, it would show up in my inbox. I was like, I love this guy. Translating these abstracts into English.
Exactly. It was back then when there was like a much smaller blogger community and there just wasn't a lot of people doing it. And it was so bad. It was like blogspot.google, spelling errors. And I just can't even, I've actually read a few of them and I'm like, I need to delete this off the internet immediately. Cause it's just like saying like inappropriate stuff. And I'm like, I gotta make sure this is not on the internet somewhere. I've cleaned my act up a little bit, since then, but it was fun. I like it.
You cleaned your act up, and this is like recurrent theme of just like you building these little communities. I gotta hit this point though. So Jack, this is Jack Vogel, not Jack Vogel.
Yes. Yeah.
PhD. So you guys are at school together in Chicago?
No. So whenever I got my job at Drexel, part of my package deal there is I was going to get assigned a PhD student to do all my research. Monkey.
Got it. And your young Ward. This is your Robin.
Yes, because like part of your package is negotiating for like research support, data, all these other things. So part of my deal was like, hey, because I'm tired of like, doing MATLAB programming all day, it would be nice now that I'm like an official professor, like as part of my package and to encourage me to come here, hook me up. So, so that's what happened. Right. And then I just got blessed because as you can imagine, most PhD students, they're not real entrepreneurial and they're like very geeky and not, you don't want them out in open society for the most part. They're like ultra geek nerd types. And like Jack was kind of a little bit unique in the sense that he was an American, which is right off the bat weird. And he, he likes sports. He was actually like a normal person, I would say. Like there's not a lot of normal people in these programs. He was actually normal. I was like, holy cow. And he was kind of like entrepreneurial by nature. And, so it was just by serendipity that I got assigned Jack because then what happened is like, as this thing transitioned from like, we're doing academic research. So like, dude, I found this billionaire, like, let's kind of do academic research, but also kind of do real research too. Just so happened that he was amenable to that kind of arrangement. And so, we just started working together on just core research stuff. And he was basically my PhD student. He eventually graduated, got his PhD. And, now he's one of obviously like my business partners and everything. So that was his story. He got into the story early because he was assigned to me as my research assistant. And it was just, great personality fit. And he's really good at what he does. And it's just all the stars aligned. But I would say that was unique.
So between getting the serendipity of getting assigned this person who then later becomes your business partner, between the writing online and the other stuff, taking the SMA, converting it to the ETF, I'm a little bit on
Yeah.
fast forward for this, but I'm just really curious.
Yeah.
When do you start talking about, well, actually, when's the SMA become the ETF? Because that's kind of a revelation in and of itself that you could even do this when you're doing it.
Yes. So just again, by luck, my first exposure to investors was ultra high net worth that hate taxes more than they like making money. Okay. That's just the nature of it. So I grew up around those type of investors, and it opened my eyes, frankly, to taxes. And I was like, holy cow, they're right. They didn't teach us that in PhD school. Like Warren Buffett obviously talks about it a lot, but when you're not that rich, you don't think about taxes because you don't really pay that much. You don't really care. It's not that relevant to you. And even though he was like the original gangster on this, it is highlighted forever that tax deferred compounding is one of my magic sauces here. I didn't really pay that much attention until I started mechanically working with really rich people, and they started explaining how this all works and how they operate. And I was like, oh my God, taxes are everything. The investment part is very small because that's an easy problem. The tax problem is much harder. And so we were very tax aware. All of our systems originally, we were doing like tax loss harvesting, like all the stuff that everyone does now. That's like what we did. We built, complicated systems that would deal with all this stuff. And it was a huge pain in the ass. And then I went to some conference because I had another rich client that was, they were trying to do, I don't remember what they call it. It was like rent-a-rick transactions, where back in the day, again, I'm sure if the IRS ever went back, they'd bust a lot of people. But apparently there were people dumping single stocks into ETFs that were already existing and just saying, hey, it's an in-kind contribution. And it's a long story about how they were doing that. But obviously you're not allowed to do that anymore. Or at least I don't know any tax lawyer that would ever say that that's like a smart thing to do. But long story short, through this conversation with a large bank firm that will remain nameless because they were telling me about this, I was like, oh my God, like, cause I learned about the ETF tax structure. And I was like, wait a second. So I don't want to do that transaction because that's clearly probably not legal. And it's a little bit too hairy even for me. But I started learning about the whole like in-kind custom. I was like, the ETF is basically my solution. Like, this SMA stuff is for the dogs. Like, I'm having to do all this complex trading and programming to try to avoid and optimize. Like an ETF, I don't have to do any of that anymore. It's like running a qualified account, like my IRA or something now. And so that light just went off in my head. And I said, we got to do that. We're not doing SMAs anymore. And so we immediately transitioned to all of our clients and everybody. We're like, we got to figure out how to get an ETF business, because this is the way, like Mandalorian style, right? Like, this is the way. We're going to figure this out. And I don't know how we're going to do this because it seems complicated, expensive, and a huge pain. But if you're going to be managing equities, you have to have an ETF or you're dead. And so we obviously got way ahead of that gravy train, which is now obvious to everybody, 12, 13 years ago. And then we just, and that led us to obviously build the ETFs and then move all our SMA crap into the ETFs, get rid of our SMA business for all intents and purposes. We still run that business, but it's like a lot smaller. And we just built the ETF version of everything, basically.
To the degree you can say it. My guess is that the ETF creation consulting business now dwarfs the asset management business, or it's bigger than the asset management business.
Yes. AUM. Well, unfortunately we have this, not unfortunately, we have this thing called Box, which, is like a blockbuster hit. So obviously, like, if you would have asked me, call it 6 months ago, I'd say ETF Architect from economic perspective is way bigger on revenue and profits. But obviously, like, Alpha Architect is quickly catching up just because we got super lucky on having one of these monster hits or whatever. But longer term and being realistic, like the scalability, uniqueness of what we're doing on the infrastructure side, that's like a big business. Like, it's just is like Alpha Architect is also a great business, but it's by design a boutique business. which is also awesome. Right. But it's, Alpha Architect, I don't, maybe someone could figure this out, but I'm not trying to be AQR with Alpha Architect, right? Like whatever. It's a great business. If we got it to 10, 20, $30 billion, I'd, fall out of my chair. Whereas ETF Architect, which is around like 11 billion, that could be $100 billion business. And I wouldn't even blink twice. Like if I, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I'd be like, well, duh. I mean, of course it was going to do that. Like, just because the nature of what it's doing and the structure and what it offers, I just feel it's inevitable, minus there's always risk and things you can't predict, but it seems very obvious that's going to be a huge business. It's already big, but it's going to be really big at some point. So
it kind of feels like you've made this full circle return almost back to like you're fulfilling a practical market need. You're kind of back on the farm with this thing.
Exactly.
You're actually building something from the ground up, not just a trading strategy or something else. Not to belittle a trading strategy in any way, but
yeah,
you're creating an actual business with this.
Yes, an operating.
You're
company.
doing it. Yeah,
yeah.
You're
Asset
doing
management is a fake business, which is why everyone loves it. Like, hey, I get a lot of money for just churning some numbers in a spreadsheet. And that's obviously huge, not to belittle like that economic service or price discovery, blah, blah, blah. But let's be honest. A dude and his dog can manage $1 billion. And if you have a good run or whatever, it's a great business, but it's not
Can you say that later so my dog can hear you? I think.
Yeah, exactly. They're capital light, they're nichey, they're boutiquey. Operating companies actually do work, like things that suck, like compliance, ops, trading, like all the boring things behind the scenes that somebody unfortunately has to do. Those just because they're not fun or sexy or enjoyable, those are big businesses, and we just happen to be skilled in taking out laundry and doing windows for people, which is great. We get paid for it, so I'll take it.
You get paid for it, and you still have, some of the team that's been with you a long time is still with you. Like you have
all my original partners. We have fortunately had one of my partners died during COVID times. Long story, but so we've had a lot of like ups and downs, over time, unfortunately. But yeah, the core team has always been around, and then I hate turnover personally. So we try to keep. If you're kind of a lifer in some sense, like we're kind of moving away from that a little bit now because we have like different functions and, we're kind of become like a real business, but like the core tribe is, it's there and it's not probably going anywhere anytime soon.
Do your kids have an awareness of this? Like, you moved them down the street a little bit, down the street and over the river.
Yeah. But my kids, we ran this out of literally my house for, I don't even know, 7-8 years. And so my kids were intimately involved from like when they're babies crawling around on our office floor, seeing like 10 random people in my house every day to like, now we got some mansion in Puerto Rico and all this stuff. Like, they've kind of seen the transition from rags to riches. And, it's not like a mansion, but, it's not like, I don't got like, I got a nice house. It's not crazy. We're still humble for giving, what we could do, but obviously it's a lot better now than it was, back in the day. And they've seen that whole thing. And, my wife could probably tell you the pitch on all my ETFs to include Box, and she's a history PhD. She could probably sell you a 351 because she's heard me a billion times on it. And my kids, like, they don't know the weeds, but like even my 9-year-old knows what an ETF is. He's like, oh, it's like a basket of stocks you can buy in a bunch of businesses. I'm like, dang, dude, that's pretty good for a 9-year-old. Like,
right.
So they know a lot more than most kids would know, I would think, about ETFs and ETF infrastructure, because even most adults don't even know about that.
What's it mean to you to like raise them around it? Like just raising kids around the business, like in the house, to raise them around all these ideas, all this discourse, to raise them around business means we're going to put our life in the ETF wrapper of the Puerto Rican tax structure and like move.
Yeah.
These are family decisions.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing is, our organization started off very tribal. where it's always was about family. Like we'd always do the barbecues, the kids are there. Like it was literally like a tribal setup, right? Now that we've kind of got a lot bigger and there's more people, more things, like obviously we're institutionalizing because that's just a necessary evil. Like you can't
not do it.
yeah, you can't not like you're not gonna, it's not gonna be like once you go from 5 people to 10 people to 20 people to 30 people, eventually, unfortunately, you lose that because now it needs to be more organized, professional. You get different walks of life, blah, blah, blah. So they were in the good phase, and now we're just in like the I don't know what the word would be, but the corporatization of our business, slow, like in our way. Like we're never going to be like full like bureaucracy, but you know, clearly we're transitioning from the garage to, you know, institutional, but we're doing it in a way that still maintains low cost affordability because that's our value prop. But and they've seen that transition. So, you know, obviously like my kids they were old enough to know in the old days what it was like. And I think they're cognizant because kids are usually good with emotional IQ that it's, you know, we're in a different phase now. You don't have like 10 random people showing up the house every day. You know, maybe I got Josh, who's one of my head trader biz partners. He's our neighbor over here. Like he'll show up, you know, and I got a few dogs and cats around here, but it's just different than in the old days of Alpha Architect. But in a good way. I think it's in a good way. It's changed.
Do you feel like you succeeded? Like, does young Wes look at this and goes, hey, you figured out how to stop being broke? You broke the...
Yeah, 100%, man. But my problem is I spent my whole life like stressing out on money, and you know, I don't need a lot of money to make, and it's not like I'm super rich, but I got more money I ever know what to do with. And just by nature, I'm like a value culture guy. And so I just don't spend a lot either. So I'm way past like the try to get rich thing. And now I'm at the phase of like, well, let's just like build something cool and badass. And so that's where we're at now. We're like, you know, anything we don't like to do, we can just hire people. We actually got money. So let's just go hire really great human capital that's smarter than us to go do jobs that, you know, I don't really like doing anymore. And then let's just do stuff that we like doing because it's fun. And let's just try to build like a cool business that, you know, that we like to hang out with. And if we don't like to do it, well, fine, we'll sell the damn. But right now it seems like, you know, it's pretty fun. It's still exciting. You know, there's always something innovative or you know, innovative / pulling my hair out like box, for example. You know, there's always double-edged swords here. But so that's the phase we're at now. It's just like, you know, like Buffett says, tiptoeing to work. And if we don't want to tiptoe anymore, we'll just sell the damn thing. But we're going to stick at it for a while.
I think a tap dance to work.
Or tap
dance,
right, not tiptoe. Yeah,
you got to be careful if you're tiptoeing. I don't want to mislead anybody.
Yeah,
you're
tap
tiptoeing.
Tap dance to work. That's right. I can't remember all the Warren Buffett quotes. I haven't been involved in that in like 10, 15 years. I used to know them all.
That's okay. Grandma Jenny would certainly understand that this is a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I still have a million questions. I'm going to stop myself here. I got a bunch of notes. I want to try to just summarize some of these key points for everybody because this is so fun. Starting off, the stop being broke, go get rich mentality, that thing that just gets in your brain when you're a kid, when you're hustling, when you're grinding to do this stuff. And especially this idea of, I love this image that I now have of 4-H Wes raising Big Red, the steer. The first big trade is Big Red getting $4 or $5 a pound versus the 50 cents a pound to make some bank, making some bank on beef. And then your dad basically saying, you've got more money than me now, so you should talk to a family member. This part too, dad seeing this and saying, you've now achieved my level of knowledge in the 4-H beef circuit. I think you need to now go to grandma. That intergenerational pass, I think is super, super cool. I also think it's really cool that you relate the ranching to the farming to conservative investing, because in a weird way that sets up this whole next phase of you in like doing the arb trades, of doing the Yahoo Finance message boards, of realizing that your team around you is the community that you create. And that's the community that you curate for, because that follows you every step of the way, curating these things. I don't know of your work if you're not curating those academic papers on the internet, 10 years on. That's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah.
You talked about Goggins, that idea of callousing the mind. I love the Goggins books, are just fantastically brutal in all the ways. The physical and the mental. So like getting it together in the physical sense as an athlete, then the mental sense of starting the PhD program, but then joining the Marines and getting both. This taxing aspect of it, the idea that it forms as muscle memory so that you come back to school, and this is one of my favorite chains of thought you explained. You got to find your own data set. You can't go use the same thing everybody else did. Realizing that your insight is that good ideas exist around good people, and it's a win-win to collaborate. That's a weird thread that I feel like follows you across this whole journey. You're not Mr. Markets where it's like, no, I have to actually like beat you up and take your lunch money. You're I can go out and build something really cool. I can grow this cow. I can have my big red and take it to the thing and make some money and extract this value, but then see it show up in all these other ways. You had in the Value Investors Club, this is like the super investors of Yahoo and Greenblattsville. Like, this is a really cool combination. Going back to Fama and him saying, not you idiot, not rejecting the idea, but having him lead by that example of saying, just show me the data. Turning over in the professor market. This is another thing I feel like nobody knows about these things. It's so cool to hear it, but like you go back, you graduate, you get the thing, you work it out with your wife, you're trying to raise a family, and then you start the hedge fund, that doesn't work out. You got the Cleveland guy, and then a billionaire cold calls you while the horses get loose. I like to think this is that Marine calm in practice. Your courage under fire in the moment is basically the horses are there, grandma is screaming, and you're telling the billionaire to just calm down. You could still relate to that, taking that phone call now. And then this big thing towards the end here of understanding that the vision and the business idea of realizing that the thing people actually want the most is to, I don't want to say not pay taxes. It's not like an avoid your civic responsibility as a person to contribute your fair share, but realizing the actual business opportunity was what you learned in your ETF is now applying it to others. It's not about the trade of selling the cows at the 4-H stall. It's about basically like you're selling Happy Meals, literally in a box, in the BOXX box. You are selling the Happy Meal now and putting these structures together, not to build an AQR, not to build just an asset management business for the sake of making you and the dog and the kids happy, but to still be doing the work, to still show up every day, make this happen as an operating company, as a family person. That's a really cool thing. This tribal mentality of keeping everybody together as the pirate flag's coming down, the Marine flag's up. That's a beautiful thing. That's a really beautiful thing. Wes, where can the people find you? If they want to learn more, where do they keep an eye? If somebody wants to launch an ETF, who do they call?
Yeah, I mean, we got two areas, alphaarchitect.com and etfarchitect.com. And I'm at Alpha Architect on Twitter, which is now called X. And that's pretty much it. And also LinkedIn. I don't even pay attention to LinkedIn, but technically I'm on there.
Technically, you should hire somebody to be your LinkedIn person. LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, maybe I already have. No, it's not. That's not my jam. We're on it on LinkedIn. I'm more of a Twitter, direct to consumer guy. So that's where I hang out mostly.
Well, you're a wonderful connector of ideas. You're a wonderful curator of information. I love watching you grow this operating company now in public and taking your people along for the ride. Wes Gray, truly an intentional investor. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Appreciate it, Matt. It's been an honor to be here.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you're watching The Intentional Investor so more people can find our show. You can follow Matt directly at cultishcreative.com or at cultishcreative on Twitter. For more great content at the intersection of investing and life, check out epsilontheory.com or at epsilontheory on Twitter.